Well, joining me now for what's been pretty interesting, to say the least, 48 hours in national politics, Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell in Canberra. All right, well, the ALP's been out with the fire hoses today, trying to sort of cool temperatures and make this problem of Victoria branch stacking go away. The National Executive, they were putting in administrators in, then they weren't because the union heavies didn't want them. Then they've gone back down that path. Where do we land tonight, Andrew?
Well, the meeting starts at 7 p.m. and there's a proposal before the meeting, Peter, which is essentially to sack the Administrative Committee of the Victorian branch of the party, to impose Steve Bracks and Jenny Macklin as administrators, and to have no pre-selections, state or federal, till 2023, to have the administrators handle that, in which case all sitting MPs would be pre-selected, but there would be no pre-selection process. And I've just in the last 10 minutes received a letter leaked. It's to the National Executive from Daniel Andrews, and I'll just read it here, Peter. It says he wants the endorsement of the process for reform for the party to guarantee integrity and probity in all of our affairs. This plan has my full support. I have no confidence in the integrity of any voting rolls that are produced for any internal elections in the Victorian branch. Accordingly, we must suspend those elections and begin a long and critical process of validating each and every member of the Labor Party in Victoria as genuine, consenting and self-funded. I cannot accept yet another review that, while well-intentioned, cannot and will not deliver the profound reform that is required. So Daniel Andrews seeking the agreement of National Executive against the wishes of the union bosses in Victoria and the Victorian right, which probably includes Bill Shorten because the AWU's there, and seeking to get the National Executive with Anthony Albanese's support to impose these administrators and sack the union bosses on the Administrative Committee of the party, being put to me as the biggest intervention in Victorian Labor since the 1970s, Peter.
Well, help me out here. Are you saying if the administrators go in, that the pre-selections will be grandfathered and guaranteed for all incumbents, at least in federal terms? That's
my understanding.
So there'll be no challenge to anyone in the federal parliament who wants to go around again. What about all the people, particularly at the state level, if they're going to be grandfathered, that may or may not still be involved in this mess of the last few days? And I've got to say, those words from the Premier ring pretty hollow when he's been leading this very same party in Victoria for a decade. On his watch, under his control, they've had this sort of I have to say corruption, let's call it what it is, corruption happens under his watch. And now he says, you know, Deirdre Chambers, what's going on here? Can't believe any of this. Bring in the administrators. How believable is that?
Well, and the review says if it's found to be irregularities, then those MPs will be disendorsed. So there'll be an expectation he does that. But yes, to your point, the motion before the National Executive, and it's still up for debate, and there's still some suggestion that this particular part might be up for some severe debate. It might get through, it might not. The National Executive notes a request of the Victorian Labor leader that all voting rights in the Victorian branch be suspended until at least 2023. That is a long period, isn't it?
I just find this extraordinary, and I made the point in my editorial, I'll make the point again. At one time, one of these ministers, Robin Scott, was in charge of the multicultural portfolio for a number of years. A lot of these stacks come from multicultural communities. I would want to be going back if I was the police or the, ICAC or indeed the administrators, but I think it needs to be independently done, and look again at every grant that went to every ethnic organisation under Robin Scott and check the veracity, the probity, the integrity of all of those grants and see whether or not they had any involvement in the branch stacking allegations that were made over the weekend.
Well, and the administrators appointed for an initial term till 31st of January 2021, provide an initial report in July 2020, final report in November 2020. And as you allude to there, Peter, the test will be, will it be the sort of report which just talks about structural reform, or will it actually find the people who've done the wrong things? I'd suggest more likely the first rather than the second. The other issue with this is IBAC, will it be within its remit to look at branch stacks as opposed to the legal definition of corruption, which is misuse of public funds and the like, or will it say at the end of the day it's not within its remit? So those are all the accountability questions that are going to be around what happens next. But we know tonight that Daniel Andrews is making enemies of some serious union bosses in Victoria with this motion, as is Anthony Albanese. I don't think there's any doubt about that. This is not plain sailing. I take your point. He's been in charge a long time. He put Somyurek back in. He's hardly a massive innocent in it all. But from appearances, it looks like he's prepared to take the Victorian right and the unions on. And let's see where he ends up at the end of that. Yeah,
I would be surprised, though, if you see Daniel Andrews go around at the next election. And that's not necessarily just because of this issue. I think he's at a high water mark. He's done everything he set out to do. He was the accidental premier. He's now absolutely consolidated. He's the most powerful premier in the country. And I think this will be a fight he's prepared to have because he doesn't need them next time round at the next election. I've got to ask you, a real push on today, and I heard it yesterday, and it's grown in intensity today, going after sections of the Labor Party, going after federal Labor MP Anthony Byrne because of allegations either he was involved himself or more broadly his office for their involvement in this investigation that aired on Sunday night. Some have pushed him hard. Some want him to go. Some certainly want him to leave the powerful Integrity and Intelligence and Security Committee. He's the deputy co-chair. Obviously, we know the chair is Andrew Hastie. What do you know on that score?
Well, I don't think he's getting under that much pressure at all because the government are quite happy with the story. And we had a couple of government people, well, we had Barnaby Joyce on Afternoon Agenda today and he was supporting him. And we've spoken to other government MPs who've done the same at very senior levels. And Anthony Albanese seems to be supporting him. So from my point of view, there are serious questions around whether he should remain deputy chair of that committee. In fact, I don't think he should, based on this conduct. OK, the right things happened in terms of they got the bad guy, but you shouldn't be just, in that sort of position, conducting this covert operation as if you're a secret agent or a royal commission. But I don't think there'd be any pressure on him to leave the parliament as such. I think it's more his membership of this committee.
Yeah, let me just play a grab from the Labor MP, Tim Richardson, out of Victoria, just on this very point.
It's greatly concerning some of the things that we saw with a federal office, no less, that was covertly recorded. We don't know who put those recordings in. We don't know what's been compromised. That's a great concern for our Commonwealth and our national security. That office obviously is a participant to the Joint Standing Committee of the Commonwealth Parliament oversighting national security. That committee's made a number of comments about sovereignty of Australia and its relationships with China. That's been well covered in the press. So the notion that there is an unknown COVID recording is a great concern on our democracy and on our sovereignty. And that needs to be investigated no less by the Australian Federal Police and, if it's a national security risk, ASIO.
Now, let's just make it very clear. He's a factional opponent of Byrne. He's a factional favourite of Somyurek, who's just departed.
Yes.
But the allegation against him, it's actually not against the law, and I heard you speak on this today in Victoria, to tape someone who, if you yourself, the taping person, is a party to the conversation. That's the first point. And if he is, Anthony Byrne or his office, involved in the uncovering of what is a pretty rotten set of circumstances in Victoria, well, isn't he a hero, not a villain here?
Well, look, I just have a problem with people recording other people without their permission. And what that means ultimately, he's given some very sensitive information in that other role. Can we trust him with it? That's the question to be answered. And I think he needs to make a full statement about his role in this, not just hide behind the investigations and say, because he's not denying it, so he was clearly involved. So just say so and justify your actions.
All right, leave it there. Absolutely It's changing, as I said, by the hour. Andrew Clennell, thanks very much for your update tonight. We'll stay close on this topic tonight when the Labor Party executive meet at 7 p.m. I'm assuming after that we'll have some word on what the final decision is.